When an old man closes his eyes and speaks, time listens. The room stills. The walls lean in. Even the wind seems to hush. Because what flows from his lips is not just language, it's legacy. His voice is cracked not from weakness, but from carrying too many unspoken truths across too many years. And when he says, "Come close, let me tell you a story," what he really means is, "Let me give you something no one can take from you." In a world obsessed with progress, we've forgotten the power of preservation. We're so busy moving forward that we've stopped looking back. But roots do not grow toward the future, they dive deep into the past. And families, if they're to survive the storms, must be rooted in story. There was a time when stories weren't just entertainment, they were education. They were instruction. They were the map for how to live. Before Google, there was grandma. Before libraries, there was legacy. Before the classroom, there was the kitchen table. Do you remember? Do you remember how your grandmother told you about the war? About the nights she went to sleep hungry, so her children wouldn't have to? Do you remember how your father, once strong as iron, cried when he talked about losing his brother? Those were more than just memories. Those were blueprints. Those were bricks for the foundation of your soul. But somewhere between screens and schedules, we stopped listening. We replaced storytelling with scrolling, connection with content, and in doing so, we lost something sacred. We lost the fire that used to burn in the center of every home, the fire of stories passed down from one trembling voice to another. And with that fire, we lost the heat that forges character, the warmth that nurtures resilience, the light that shows you who you are. Because identity isn't built from DNA. It's built from memory, from names you never met but still carry in your blood, from places you've never seen but still walk inside your bones. You think you're just you, but you are the prayers of your grandmother, the work-worn hands of your great-grandfather, the defiance of every ancestor who refused to die in silence. You are the result of stories survived, and if you never hear them, you will never truly know yourself. Let me tell you something the elderly know, something time teaches that textbooks never will. Pain, when it's buried, festers, but pain, when it's spoken in story, heals. When your father finally told you about the time he failed completely, publicly, painfully, he gave you more than just insight. He gave you permission. Permission to fall and not be ashamed. Permission to be human. And when your mother told you about how she kept going, even when no one believed in her, she wasn't just telling a story. She was lighting a torch, handing it to you, saying, "Now go, this is how we survive." Because families don't need more rules. They need more remembrance. Not lectures, but lived experience. Not commands, but confessions. What if we returned to that? What if we sat down, no phones, no filters, and said, "Let me tell you about the time I almost gave up, but didn't"? What if instead of hiding our wounds, we revealed the wisdom in them? What if instead of saying, "You wouldn't understand," we said, "I want you to understand," because this story might save you one day, and it just might. Because when a child hears that his grandfather once stood alone with no money, no backing, and only a dream and still made something of his life, that child walks into his own storms differently. He walks in knowing that struggle is not a curse but a calling. That pain is not the end, but the beginning. You think these stories are small? They're not. They're anchors. And we are raising generations without them adrift, anxious, lost because no one ever told them where they came from. No one told them they were forged in fire, that their bloodline is lined with the fingerprints of survivors, that their lineage is louder than their loneliness. But you can be the one to change that. You with your voice, you with your memories, you with the courage to sit down and speak even when your hands tremble, even when the story is messy, especially when it's messy. Because perfection is not what binds families. Vulnerability is. And the elderly know this. They know that what matters in the end is not how much money you made, not how many followers you gained, not how fast you climbed, but how many stories you told that helped someone else rise. There's a reason the wise ones never rush. They know that truth takes time, that stories are slow-burning fires, that the lessons we need most are often wrapped in the voices we ignore. Listen. Listen before it's too late, because one day that voice will go silent. And when it does, you will wish you had asked more questions, paid more attention, held on to every syllable like gold. But it doesn't have to be a regret. It can be a beginning. Start now. Gather your children, sit at the table, and speak, because the future is built by those who remember the past. Don't wait for the perfect moment, it doesn't exist. Don't wait for the right words, they'll come when your heart is open. Just begin. Begin with, let me tell you about your uncle. Begin with, there was a day I almost lost everything. Begin with the truth, raw, unfiltered, and real. Because children don't need superheroes. They need real stories from real people who overcame real pain. They need to know that their blood carries the echoes of men and women who refused to quit, who walked through fire and came out stronger, who didn't wait for a miracle, they became one. And when they know that, they walk taller, they think clearer, they act braver. Because a mind without roots is like a kite in a storm, tossed, turned, directionless. But a mind anchored in legacy becomes unshakable. It can withstand winds, waves, wars because it knows where it stands. Every family has a vault of treasure hidden in its past, not of wealth, but of wisdom. But that treasure can't be unlocked by silence. It takes a voice. It takes a choice to remember, a choice to speak. You want to raise a child with purpose? Then show them theirs is not the first battle ever fought. Show them that greatness isn't a sudden lightning bolt. It's a torch passed down one generation to the next through the sacred art of storytelling. And don't just share the victories. Share the losses, the heartbreak, the regret, the recovery. Because when you speak of your failures, you teach them how to rise. When you speak of your fears, you teach them how to confront their own. When you speak of your faith, you teach them how to find light in the dark. That's what the elders knew. They knew that stories weren't just for comfort. They were for courage. They weren't just nostalgia. They were instruction manuals for survival. And they passed them down with a reverence that we've nearly forgotten. But you can bring it back, even now, especially now. In a time where the world is louder than ever, the quiet, honest voice of an elder, a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt can become the lifeline a young soul never knew they needed. Because we're not just in a crisis of economy or education. We're in a crisis of identity, and storytelling is the cure. Tell them about the time you were afraid. Tell them what you learned. Tell them what you saw when everything fell apart and how you built it back piece by piece. Tell them about the time you loved and lost, about the time you prayed and waited, about the time you gave and were betrayed and still chose to forgive. These aren't just moments, they are medicine. And the voice of wisdom, when spoken with love, heals in ways no lecture ever could. The elderly may walk slower, but their words travel faster, they go straight to the soul. Their stories don't just entertain, they educate, they liberate. And when shared, they echo, far beyond the room, far beyond the moment. They echo into the hearts of children who will one day become parents, into teenagers who will one day be teachers, into strangers who will one day become leaders. That's the power of storytelling. In families, it ripples across time, across pain, across bloodlines. And it doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need applause. It just needs truth and a voice brave enough to speak it. You don't have to be a writer. You just have to be a rememberer. Because even the smallest story, if true, can save a life. And it will. It will save a life one quiet night when a young man sits alone on his bed, eyes swollen from silent battles no one sees. And in the moment where quitting whispers its sweetest lie, he'll remember your voice. That story you told about the time you were in the same dark place, how you kept going, how the pain shaped you, not shattered you. He'll remember, and he'll rise. That's the power we've forgotten we hold. That's the power of a story told in love, told with conviction, told not to impress but to imprint. See, children don't need perfect role models. They need honest ones. They need to know that strength is not the absence of scars, but the courage to show them. That success doesn't always look like winning sometimes. It looks like standing back up when no one clapped. Sometimes it looks like forgiving when it would be easier to forget. And the stories that show that kind of truth, they aren't trending on social media. They're locked inside the hearts of our elders, inside quiet people with stormy pasts, inside ordinary lives that walked through extraordinary fire. And you are one of them. You may think you have nothing to share, that your story is too small, that your pain is too personal. But let me tell you, someone in your family is drowning in the very sea you swam across, and your words might be the only lifeboat they'll ever hear. Don't keep it inside. There is no shame in struggle when the struggle has a purpose. And the purpose of your story isn't to relive the pain, it's to release the power. You might not get a standing ovation. You might not even get a response. But someday, years from now, that child you told the truth to, they'll tell their child. And the light you sparked will burn on, quietly, boldly, eternally. That's legacy. Not money, not medals, but moments of truth shared from soul to soul. You want to know the real definition of wealth? It's not in your bank account. It's in how many hearts your story can reach even after you're gone. And that only happens if you begin. Begin before you think it's perfect. Begin while your voice still shakes. Begin even if you think no one cares. Because someone does. Someone is waiting for the exact words only you can speak. Someone needs to know that they are not the first to feel lost, broken, unsure. Someone needs the blueprint that only your life can offer. And no book will ever give it to them the way you can. No podcast, no app, no influencer. Just you, in a room, at a table, with nothing but your truth and your time. You don't need a platform, you just need presence. That's what the elders understood long before the world got noisy, that truth is not loud, it is steady, it is sacred, and when spoken with love, it echoes forever. So sit down, speak slow, speak true. Because your voice may be old, but it still builds nations. And those nations begin at your dinner table. They begin with your granddaughter leaning in as you whisper what courage really looked like when you had none left. They begin when your grandson hears how you held the line when life gave you every reason to let go. They begin not in grand speeches, but in the humble tremor of your voice when you speak the kind of truth that isn't easy, but is necessary. We live in an era where distraction has become identity, where people are chasing validation, but starving for wisdom, where families share pictures, but not presence, where we measure value by how loud someone is, not how deep. But the ones who have walked the furthest often speak the softest. Because wisdom doesn't shout. It reveals. It reveals itself in the weathered hands of a grandfather who built with nothing but grit, in the quiet sigh of a mother who sacrificed her dreams for her children, in the tears of an uncle who still remembers the night he buried his best friend and chose to live anyway. That is the kind of power only life can teach, and it's meant to be passed down, not locked away. Every wrinkle tells a story the world needs to hear. Every scar is a sermon for someone else's salvation. But we lose this when we hide what we've lived, when we choose silence over sharing, when we think pain disqualifies us from being heard. But it's the opposite. Your pain is your permission. It's what makes your voice matter. It's what makes your words holy. And if you don't speak them, who will? Your story, your real story, isn't about shame or ego. It's not about making you look strong. It's about making someone else feel less alone. It's about leaving a light on in a dark hallway that someone else must walk down. Because if you could survive it, so can they. If you could forgive, so can they. If you could rebuild, so can they. But only if they know it's possible. Only if you tell them how. Because courage isn't just found in war zones or boardrooms. Sometimes it's in the way you told your kids you were wrong. Sometimes it's in the way you kept a promise when it cost you everything. Sometimes it's in the story you were afraid to tell, but told anyway. That's the kind of courage that lives forever. It plants itself in the hearts of those who hear it. It blossoms in the souls of children who carry it forward. And it becomes a forest of resilience that no storm can uproot. You think storytelling is soft? It's not. It's the steel spine of legacy. It's the invisible armor that generations wear in battles they haven't fought yet. It's the map when the road disappears. So when you speak, speak with that weight. Speak like your words matter because they do. Speak like what you're saying could shift a life because it will. And never let the world convince you that your story is irrelevant because you're older. If anything, that's why it's sacred. You've seen more, felt more, lost more, loved more. And now you get to give more. So give the story. Give the struggle. Give the victory. Because what you've lived could become the strength someone else will live by. And that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, like the calm voice of a grandmother who once held her family together through a storm no one else saw. Sometimes it's in the way your father folded his coat over your shoulders on a cold night and never said a word, because some stories aren't told with mouths. They're told with love. And love in its purest form is memory wrapped in meaning. You see, we don't remember the facts. We remember the feelings. We remember the tone in a loved one's voice when they told us we'd be okay. We remember the warmth of a kitchen where generations gathered. We remember the look in their eyes when they spoke of the past, not with regret, but with reverence. That's what storytelling in families gives us: reference points for the soul. A compass to find ourselves when we are lost. And we all get lost, every single one of us. But those who've been given stories don't stay lost for long, because somewhere inside they remember, I come from people who fought. I come from people who made it through worse. I come from people who didn't quit. It's not about pride. It's about placement. Knowing where you stand because you know where you came from. Think about the greatest people in history, the ones who shaped entire generations. They didn't just leave behind monuments or movements. They left stories. Lincoln's honesty, Edison's persistence, Rosa Parks' quiet refusal, Mandela's forgiveness. These were people whose legacies lived because someone kept telling the story. Now ask yourself, who's telling yours? If you don't tell it, who will? Who will tell your children about the time you had to start over at 40? Or when you sat in the dark, broke and broken, and still found a reason to keep going? Who will tell them that you didn't always have answers, but you never stopped asking the right questions? That's what the world needs now. Not more noise, more meaning. Not more content, more connection. Not more influence, more inheritance, the kind that's invisible but invaluable. And this inheritance doesn't come from a will. It comes from your willingness to share what you've lived. You don't need a microphone. You need a moment. You don't need an audience. Just one listener, one child, one grandchild, one soul sitting across from you, willing to listen to your truth, because even one is enough. One person transformed by your story is enough to change a family. One family strengthened by legacy is enough to change a generation. One generation anchored in identity is enough to change the world. But the first link in that chain is you. It's you choosing to stop hiding. It's you deciding to break the silence that's kept your story buried. It's you recognizing that what you've lived through isn't just your past, it's someone else's guide, someone else's ladder, someone else's hope. And there is no greater purpose than that, because hope passed through story becomes unbreakable. It's not the same as motivation. Motivation fades. Hype wears off. But hope, real hope, rooted in lived truth, passed from mouth to heart, that stays. It becomes part of a person's bones, part of how they walk into the world, part of how they rise after falling. That's what storytelling in families truly is. A transference of invisible strength. And it doesn't need to be polished. In fact, it shouldn't be. The most powerful stories are the ones with cracks in them, where the voice breaks, where the tears come uninvited, where the silence between words says more than the words themselves. Because those moments are real. And reality is what heals. You want to know why some people never find peace? It's not because they didn't try hard enough. It's because they were never told that peace was possible. They were never shown a map. They were never handed a story of survival, a memory of mercy, a tale of redemption told by someone who walked that path before them. So they suffer in silence, thinking they're alone, thinking no one understands, thinking their failure is final. But then, one day, you tell them about the time you failed. You tell them about the night you fell to your knees and begged for answers that didn't come. You tell them how you walked through seasons of silence and still came out singing. And suddenly, they can breathe again. Suddenly, the shame lifts. Suddenly, the darkness makes sense. Because someone else, someone they love, someone they trust, lived it too. That's the power we hold, all of us, especially those who've lived long enough to carry years like armor. You don't wear your age, you wear your victories. You don't carry wrinkles, you carry wisdom. You don't speak with fragility, you speak with fire. And that fire lights torches in the hands of those who follow. So light them, and speak. Tell the stories that shaped you. Tell the stories that nearly broke you but didn't. Tell the stories that made you weep but then made you wiser. Because the ones listening are more ready than they seem. And the silence between generations, it's not made of ignorance. It's made of waiting. Waiting for someone, anyone to say, this is what I lived through, and this is what I learned. That's how the chain of wisdom is restored. Not through power, through presence. Not through authority, through authenticity. Not through perfection, through pain transformed into purpose. Your life is not a mistake. It is not a collection of random events. It is a message written in scars, spoken in silence, waiting to be told. And if you don't tell it now, then when? Because one day your seat will be empty. And the question will remain, did you pass on the fire or let it die with you? But it doesn't have to die with you. Not if you choose now. Choose to ignite it. Choose to hand your flame to the trembling hands of the next in line. A child unsure of who they are, a teenager looking for meaning in a mirror, a young adult drowning in expectations but starving for truth. Because they don't need answers from a search bar. They need memory soaked in meaning. They need to know that the blood running through their veins once climbed mountains, once crossed oceans, once stood barefoot in the face of fear and did not flinch. They need to know that they belong to something bigger, something sacred. They need to know that they're not the first to feel tired, not the first to question their worth, not the first to wonder if they'll make it. And they need to know they will. Because you did. That's not ego. That's not nostalgia. That's power. A holy kind of power. The kind that lives in every wrinkle, every gray hair, every long pause between sentences. That's why the wise speak slowly, because they understand the weight of a word. Because they know one sentence can lift a soul. One memory can build a mindset. One story can shift the destiny of a family. And maybe you don't think you're wise. Maybe you think your life has been too messy, too ordinary, too full of regrets. Let me tell you, wisdom doesn't come from perfection. It comes from reflection. From looking back with eyes open, heart humble, and voice willing. You don't need to have done everything right. You just need to be real. Because what they need most, your children, your grandchildren, the ones who look up to you, is not a polished tale of victories. They need the whole truth. Tell them how you doubted. Tell them how you failed. Tell them how you wanted to give up and didn't. Tell them how you walked through fire and found something sacred on the other side. They're not listening for fairy tales. They're listening for a map. And you have it. Not in a book, not in a manual, but in the way you lived. Every sleepless night, every lost dream, every hard-earned lesson. All of it. It's worth more than gold. Because gold can be spent. But truth gets carried. It gets buried deep in a child's memory and surfaces years later just when they need it most. That's how stories work. They don't always feel urgent in the moment, but they are seeds. And seeds, when spoken with love, always grow. Maybe not right away, maybe not visibly. But one day, in the middle of a storm, when life demands strength from your children, they will remember your story and it will hold them up. So speak like that. Speak like your words are timber for bridges you'll never walk across, like they're shelter for storms you'll never see, like they're the ground your great-grandchildren will one day stand on. Because they are. And once spoken, truly spoken, a story lives forever. Forever. That's what we're really building when we speak. Not moments, not applause, not recognition, but permanence. Something that endures beyond our years. Something that lingers in the marrow of generations. Something that whispers in the silence long after our voice is gone. And when your body is laid to rest, it won't be your possessions they'll cling to. It won't be the house, the watch, the bank account, or the framed photographs. No, it'll be the stories, the words, the truths. They will remember what you said in the quiet moments, what you shared when they least expected it, what you revealed when you stopped trying to protect your pride and started trying to protect their future. And they'll say, I remember when Papa told me this. I remember how Grandma looked at me when she spoke about her first job. I remember how Dad's voice shook when he told me about the time he failed. And that memory, it won't just warm them, it will guide them. Because we are all walking blind into tomorrow, and the only light we carry is the wisdom someone dared to give us. So be the one who dares. Dare to speak the words you've buried. Dare to tell the story you've never shared. Dare to go back into the darkest chapters and pull out the lesson for someone who hasn't yet made it to that page. You'll be surprised what rises when you let the silence go. You'll be surprised how your most ordinary day may become someone's blueprint for surviving their worst. You'll be surprised how healing yourself becomes healing for others, just by speaking out loud what you once survived in silence. This isn't about teaching, it's about transferring. Not authority, but alignment. Not advice, but anchoring. It's about saying, you're not floating alone. Here's a piece of the raft I built with my own bare hands. Take it, stand on it, build your own. That's the architecture of legacy. And it doesn't require degrees, titles, or fame. It only requires a heart brave enough to feel again and a mouth brave enough to speak again. And here's the secret the elders knew, the great ones, the wise ones, the ones who never needed to shout to be heard. A story that is never told becomes a life that is never truly lived. But when you tell it, when you breathe it into existence, you resurrect everything that tried to break you and show the world it only built at you. You honor your pain. You justify your survival. You prove that struggle wasn't in vain. And you gift every ounce of that hard-earned truth to the ones who come after you. So speak, while your heart still beats, while your breath still moves, while someone is still close enough to hear, because the clock will not wait. And the most powerful inheritance you will ever give doesn't sit in a vault. It lives in your story. And once it's spoken, it cannot be undone. It travels. It travels through the eyes of a child watching you, wondering what courage really looks like. It travels through the ears of your son, who's pretending not to care but is memorizing your every word. It travels into the soul of a granddaughter who thinks she's weak until she hears how you stood up after being knocked down by something 10 times heavier than what she's facing. It becomes a quiet revolution in their spirit. Not loud, not fast, but deep. That's how strength is transferred in families, not by pushing, but by planting, doing. And every time you open your mouth to tell the truth, to share a wound that's now a weapon, to pour out wisdom shaped by time and fire, you are planting seeds that will one day bloom in rooms you'll never enter. That is the glory of the spoken life. That is the immortality hidden in storytelling. Because the truth is, you are not just telling your story. You are rewriting theirs. You are reprogramming the patterns that were meant to destroy them. You are breaking the silence that shame built. You are handing them a tool when all they had were questions. You are saying without saying, you don't have to walk blind anymore. I've walked the path. Let me light the way. And maybe the world outside your home will never know your name, but your family will never forget your voice. And that is enough. It has always been enough. Because every empire begins with a story. Every warrior was once a child who heard someone say, "You come from strength, you come from survivors. You come from love that refused to die." That's how nations are built, not just by war or peace treaties, but by stories told at dinner tables. Stories passed across generations like sacred scripture. Stories that carry pain, purpose, and pride in equal measure. And one day, when your body is gone and only your memory remains, someone will whisper your name and say, "He told me a story once, and I never forgot it." And in that moment, you will live again. Not in flesh, but in flame. The fire you lit with your words will still burn in hearts, in decisions, in destinies, altered by your courage to share what most people hide. So don't hide anymore. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait until someone asks. Speak because it matters. Speak because the future depends on it. Speak because someone's identity is tangled in your memory, and unless you release it, they will never fully know who they are. This isn't a suggestion. It's a calling. And your story, your true story, is the answer. It always was. Even in the moments you thought your life was too quiet, too messy, too broken, even then, your story was becoming the medicine someone else would one day need. Even in the chapters you wished you could erase, the ones heavy with regret or failure, something was being written that had the power to heal. Not just you, them, the ones watching, the ones waiting, the ones you may never meet, but whose strength will come from the scars you chose to reveal. Because when you speak truth, real truth, the kind that's soaked in experience, not theory, you don't just inform. You transform. You open locked doors in hearts that didn't even know they were trapped. You give breath to lungs suffocating under shame. You awaken dreams in souls who thought they were too far gone. You become proof, living proof, that survival is not just possible, it's powerful. And that's what families need most. Not perfect people, not perfect histories. Just anyone brave enough to say, "Here's who I really am. Here's what I really lived. And if I made it, so can you." This is the kind of strength the world can't manufacture. It can't be downloaded, can't be bought, can't be replicated in a podcast or a book or a post. Because it's ancient, it's spiritual, it's deeply human. It is bloodline wisdom. And when it's passed from mouth to mouth, heart to heart, it becomes armor. Invisible but unbreakable. Not just for today's battles, but for tomorrow's wars. Because one day, long after you're gone, someone will stand at a crossroads and feel your voice in their chest. Remember what Grandpa said? Remember how she got back up after losing everything? Remember what he did when he had no money, no friends, no way out? Remember what she said about love, about never letting bitterness win? And they'll choose the better path. Because you showed them the way. That's the eternal return of a life that was spoken out loud. A story that didn't stay hidden in journals or buried in silence. It lived. It moved. It mattered. So speak before your voice is gone. Speak before time steals what only you can say. Because every moment you wait, the next generation drifts further, not because they're broken, but because they're hungry. Hungry for meaning. Hungry for grounding. Hungry for truth spoken with love, without filters, without shame. And yes, you have that truth. It's not too late. It's never too late. As long as breath remains in your chest and love in your bones, it is not too late to give them the gift of your story. So give it, and watch your family rise. Not because they followed your footsteps, but because they walked taller, stronger, and with more courage, because they knew whose shoulders they were standing on. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories and life-changing insights. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment that could inspire your journey. Your support means everything. Thank you for being part of this community.